Welcome to the Savvy Property Investors Podcast, a weekly show that delivers the best hard-hitting property industry news, business advice, and talks that will get you ascending in the real estate industry. Now, here's your host, the amazing award-winning property and business coach, best-selling author, and serial entrepreneur, Miss Sapphire Gray.
Welcome to the Savvy Property Investors Show, episode 9. Today's topic, we're looking at what is co-living and why is it so popular. Today's guest is Sarah Watts from Alt Street Property. Welcome to another Property Investors Show. Our guest this week is Sarah Watts. We'll be sharing with you what is co-living and why is it so popular. Sarah is one half of Alt Street Property, a venture that started out with each of its founders owning one property unit each. Sarah purchased her with her postgraduate savings. Since then, Sarah and Andrew began to build their business in sunny Sydney, Australia, buying a further 4 properties, which were either added to the property portfolio or sold for a profit. Eventually settling roots in the UK and moving with their beloved dog, they found the UK rentals weren't very pet friendly, and 95% of the places didn't accept pets or living conditions were up to the standard that they have been accustomed to. So in 2018, they came across the concept of shared living, HMOs. Within a year, the first HMO was added to the Alt Street portfolio. A landlord for over 10 years, starting with simple buy-to-lets, Sarah and her partner more recently moved into flips and HMOs. Alt Street Property has gone on to create a portfolio of boutique design-led co-living houses for young professionals in Northampton and have continued to grow this sector of the business. In addition to this, Sarah is now working with investors, helping them grow their savings and investing pots while undertaking the next project. I'm Sapphire Gray, your host, so let's get started. So thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
Good, thank you, and thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
Excellent. So let's get started with the first question that our viewers are burning to learn about. Can you define what is a HMO?
So a HMO, in its simplistic term, is 3 or more people that form 2 or more households. So normally they share a kitchen, sometimes bathroom facilities as well. So it's generally the more technical definition for a shared house. So it could be students, could be professionals. There's lots of different types of HMOs, but that's in simplistic term, that's what a HMO is.
Perfect. And please talk us about what is the licensing, because obviously there's different rules for different types of property strategies. So what's the licensing rules surrounding this kind of property?
So licensing is a quite complicated area, I would say. I would actually say there is a difference between mandatory licensing and additional selective licensing. What I will focus on is the mandatory stuff. So that's national. Some councils will have additional licensing for smaller HMOs, which is 3 to 4 people. Generally speaking, the mandatory licensing kicks in for every council once you hit 5 or more people within a property. So that's when you must get a license. If it's 5 or more occupants within the property, that's when licensing kicks in, and you'll need to be very mindful. There is minimum square meterage rates for each room. There is every council will have a slightly different amenity guide, but it would have things like number of hob facilities, washing facilities, bathroom facilities, things like that. And that's what every HMO landlord will need to have if they have 5 or more occupants in the property.
Absolutely. I know I've come across with my HMOs that even fridge space counted and kitchen cupboards, all those things are accounted for how many sort of tenants you have into your property. So we're really here talking about co-living. So what's the difference between your standard HMO and co-living?
So So some people would argue that there is no difference, but to me, the distinguishing factor would be the service deliverable. What makes it just a share house versus something that is, a little bit more exciting than that? Co-living to me is that service deliverable element. So without that element, it really just is a share house. There isn't much of a difference. So to me, it's the events, it's the community. They're the main two things that I would say differentiates it from any other share house that you have out there. So, do your tenants all get together? Do they form a community bond? Do they have events that they can regularly attend to? Some co-living schemes would also have benefits like movie tickets, discounts for things like that. So that community vibe is generally, that's the distinguishing factor between a regular HMO and the co-living element of it.
Brilliant. So how can one achieve on a smaller scale for smaller developers?
I would consider myself as a smaller developer. So I have 3 HMOs at the moment, with hopefully the 4th in the pipeline. Within the 3, they're all walking distance from each other. That's how we create the community bond. We also have regular events. So we've just recently done our end of summer party. We've got our Christmas party coming up in November. We're putting on Easter coming up for early next year, really creating that community vibe. So to me, it's about your tenants knowing not just their housemates. It's more than that. How can you connect them to their local environment? A lot of them, in my case anyway, they will move for work. So when you move for work, you don't have your friends and family around you. You're literally there for the job. You want more of a social hub and more of a social vibe than just, oh, great, it's me and 4 or 5 others. It's who can I go to in my local community? Or maybe I can go to your house. I know I'll make, there's friendships that you want to say, when I was a graduate or when I was living in X area for work, it was great because I had my whole community around me and I still have friends with them today. That's what we're kind of aiming to provide. So events is a big one, and also creating and encouraging that community vibe. So whether or not it's, hey guys, there's something local going on. Do you see the Fun Fest just arrived down the road? Anyone want to go for a movie? And facilitating that conversation. So you can't force anybody to be part of that. You can only facilitate that and hope that it comes about.
I think this is fantastic, but for some viewers, they might be sort of miffed as, what are you actually talking about? Because this is absolutely a game changer in the HMO space. So what you're really saying is that you create a community with your HMOs and invite them to events that you actually put on with your company?
That's right. So our most recent one, we put it in a summer barbecue. So I've got one house that actually has a pool table, a bar, a yoga area, and a really nice private outdoor courtyard. So we invited all of our tenants around, and obviously you're not going to force anybody, but we put the invite on, say, hey guys, we've got end of summer party. We're putting on a barbecue. Come and, meet everyone. And that's how we kind of facilitate that community vibe. So on top of that, I think it's also about communal spaces. So I've just mentioned before, I've got one large HMO that can facilitate a lot of that kind of stuff. And we absolutely love putting our events on in that HMO to really create, that kind of
environment. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's making the use of the communal space, because it's absolutely huge. I've had people come to me, go, oh, you could put an extra bedroom in here. It's like, I could, but I would forego a lot of that community vibe out of that communal space, which is so important when you're creating and designing your HMOs as well.
And how is your tenants' reception to this kind of community building within the frameworks of living amongst strangers, becoming friends and building that community? How have they received that?
A lot of the time, people, in my circumstance, they will move for 2 different reasons. So they will move for the job, and they want a nice space. And that is majority of the reason. They'll tick all the boxes and things like that. A lot of the other times, they're local and they're moving away because they just don't have any connection to anybody in the house. Or they're a 9-to-5 worker and they're in a shift worker house. Or, they're just missing that, I can't form friendships because when I'm at work, you're not there, and when I'm there, you're at work. So it's about having tenant selection is also quite important, I would say, with that one, and just making sure that you've got very similar people who want similar things, and a lot of them do want that social aspect.
Yeah.
They want more than just 4 walls.
Yeah, I think it actually solves the problem of loneliness as well, because when you're renting a house and you've got your family, that's one thing. But when you're renting a space, a room, and then you don't have any other person around you that's connecting with you, it's kind of really isolating. But what you've achieved yourself, which is, I give you kudos to that, is creating that co-living space that unifies everybody together. And then it's a choice whether they participate or they don't. But at least they've got a choice. In most HMOs, they don't even have or not been given that choice. And the spaces that they're going into can be small as well. You're talking about you've got a space where you can have 3 of your different houses, all everybody meeting in one home. That's absolutely brilliant. And because you've got it all located in the same space, it really does make the connections a lot easier. So they can actually pop over to each other's houses, I'm assuming, and just really get to know one another, which I think is really brilliant that you've done it in this way. So can you share with us any tips on when choosing a location for a co-living HMO?
I think for me, proximity is one thing. So proximity to amenities, I'm talking shops, I'm talking transport. They're all the things that, to be honest, any HMO should tick all those boxes. True. I think what makes a good co-living space is the fact that they are close to each other. I think, to me, that's really handy, because you can create a community when they're walking distance to each other. They don't need to be, but it helps when it is. And I think that is absolutely key for me, is that, oh, my car broke down, but I know so-and-so at this house is a mechanic.
That's so true.
Or, someone's really good, or someone's a runner, a triathlete, or, loves to go running at the country park. Does anyone want to go for a run down the road, or whatever it is? I think those facilities around you, when you talk about that location, is really important. And it would help facilitate that community vibe, I would say. So location in that respect is key.
Perfect. So join us after the break with more insights from Sarah.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button below. Our podcast is only made possible by great listeners like you.
Welcome back, Sarah. Thank you so much for giving us such a great start to the show. I want to get into, what are some of the main characters of a co-living situation?
Can you kind of explain to me what you mean by characters?
Right. So you said about tenant selection. So what is what kind of tenants do you actually select? And what is those kind of characters? What makes it gel so well with the different types of people coming into them?
Okay. So for me, I concentrate on young professionals. I find that they are the most social, outgoing. They're the kind of characteristics I look for. Within the individual house, you're not talking the wider community, but the individual house, they really need to be similar in their personality traits. I want, someone clean and tidy. Obviously, everybody does. But in terms of, I touched on it before, where if you've got a 9-to-5 house, you want to keep them 9 to 5.
Yeah.
If you have someone that does shift work, so medical professionals, law enforcement, for example, you want to keep that house as shift work.
Okay.
Because what I find is when you start mixing the two, you start to get problems. And that is my rule, is I don't mix students and professionals together. They are completely different kettle of fish. And to me, I keep them separate. So the characteristics I look for is very similar personality traits per house. The wider community, I'm quite picky about, it being young, it being professional, people wanting that social. So why are you moving? That is the number one question I ask them when I pre-screen is, why are you moving? And if a lot of the time is, I'm looking for something a bit more social. I don't even know anyone in my house. Or sometimes it's, I live with 9 other people. I live in a mega HMO and it's too big for me. I want something boutique. And that is kind of the answers I'm looking for when I pre-screen. I pre-screen very thoroughly. A pre-screen can't judge someone kind of on a CV, but you kind of get a vibe as to what they're looking for. And if it's more that social aspect, more than just, I'm looking for a very cheap room, that's what you're looking for. So they're the type of people who we want as members of our community.
Excellent. So what are some of the if there's any pitfalls of this co-living arrangement.
I think it's more there's more benefits than the negatives to co-living. Obviously, co-living to me is an extension of just what a HMO is. So if you just had a HMO, yeah, I can fit anybody anywhere. You wouldn't really care too much about tenant selection. I think you have to be very mindful of that pre-screening process and put a little bit more effort into really getting to know people beforehand to make sure that they're going to be a good fit. Versus I'll just dump anyone in there because they're the first one that applied. That community vibe. And I think the other pitfall, if I say a pitfall, it would probably be more so from a financial opportunity. So yes, it does cost us to put events on, not very much to be fair. What I find is when you do put events on, they're more likely to stay and renew their AST and stay for a very long time. So in terms of the voids that you would attract, the cost of putting the event on is really negligible compared to the long-term tenure that you would get from most of these guys who want to stay with us until they can afford their own home. So they're in a really good space. They don't want any credit problems. They want to save their money by living in a share house and then getting their first step on the housing ladder. And that's 100% makes me feel, as a landlord, makes me feel so great that you're actually helping them facilitate that, that they want to get on the housing ladder themselves. So although you'd see the cost side as a pitfall and, going through and organizing and the hassle of organizing, I don't really find that as a hassle because there's so many other benefits to having that community and the events on for our community.
And that's why I absolutely say you have to be passionate about what you do. You, obviously, speaking to you, I know you're passionate about it. So being passionate about something that you do, it's not about the cost in the end. It's about how your tenants are receiving what you are doing for them. And the long-term rewards is that they're staying with you until they can get on their foot on that ladder to buy their own, or just stay with you because they just love the way it's been operated and what you're delivering. So they will stay with you long term, no matter what, because they just believe in that space is for them. That's brilliant. So how can you successfully manage all of the different dynamics, personalities in all your HMOs? What's some tips you can share with our audience about how to manage multiple people?
So it is tricky. And I would say, even though I've been a landlord for over a decade, mainly in single lets, HMOs to me is in the last few years. And there's definitely a few things when you start putting multiple personalities into things, it makes it a little bit more complicated than just sticking a family in there that kind of gets on with it. So I think I'm a big believer in prevention over cure.
Yes.
And pre-screening, I've said that before, but pre-screening is 100% like the thing that you need to nail down, because you get the right people in, they will gel, and you will have a sensational time as a landlord. There's no major hiccups, there's no people fighting with each other. You just don't want the stress or the hassle. You just want everyone to live there. They're happy with their room, they're happy with the maintenance of the property, which is what you have to do as a landlord. So I think pre-screening is 100% one of my major tips. Make sure you get the right person, wait for the right person. So if they're not quite right, your gut instinct's off and you're like, this person's telling me lies, or I just don't get a good feeling at the viewing, or there's something wrong with their pre-screen, they're not revealing everything, it's gonna be a potential problem down the track. So trust your gut instinct, do your thorough pre-screening, and make sure you get the right people in. Brilliant. So that's one of the main things. The other thing I think, and it will get better as you scale your business, but it's definitely keeping on top of that maintenance. So the last thing you want is, oh great, like my coat hooks just fell off, or my door closer doesn't work, which is a legal problem, by the way. It's the silicon that then leads to a leak and things like that, on top of the little nitty gritty stuff. And although it's really boring to talk about, I've got a handyman that's booked in once a month, goes in and updates every non-urgent item. So I'm not talking like, oh, there's something wrong with the fire alarm. That's obviously urgent and we will get that looked at. But I'm talking, my coat hook's off, or, we'll just add it to the list for next time. It's not like someone's going to die or anything like that. It's not urgent, but all my non-urgent stuff, it gets done every month. We put it on the list and it all gets, all the niggles get done. If there's anything else, they know John's going to come round
Yeah.
next month and get all the lists knuckled down. So, if there's any little things like the weeds have gone nuts over spring, summertime, which they do, the garden needs a bit of a prune back. You think, do I really need to go organize someone to go and do that?
Yeah.
If you don't keep on top of it, this is what people go, you know what, my landlord doesn't care. Look at the state of this place. And I think, single lets where they kind of have to keep an eye on for themselves. It's a little bit easier, but with HMOs and with co-living, you need to keep on top of the small stuff.
Totally
so they're my top tips about managing HMOs for a hassle-free life.
Yeah, I totally agree with you having a handyman on your books, because they're the ones that really keep your property in tip-top shape. And if your tenants already know, look, we know we've got a handyman attached to our house, they know the work is going to get done. If you've got cleaners attached to the house, they know it's going to be cleaned. All these things that they know that's going to happen. So they're not going to be saying like, oh, I'm going to be after chasing them like 6 months down the line. It still ain't done. They know by the end of the month, all these little things will be done. If it's a light bulb that needs changing immediately, if it's putting them, they can't be walking around in the dark, those things get done. And I always say that because I've got a handyman on my books, I've got cleaners, I've got all of these facilities to make my life easier as well as my tenants' life easier as well. Because I don't want them to feel, even with my single lets, I have a handyman for them as well. And they've got all the contacts for all the insurers that I've got the appliance insured. So they feel like they're in control of their home as well, what they would feel if they were living by themselves. So I want them to have that independence as well as knowing that everything has been sorted out for them. So yeah, you're doing that. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
When you're someone is on a tight budget, would you say HMOs is right for them?
I think with someone on a tight budget, if you're just talking a standard HMO, it is an absolutely economical way to get, get by, really. I was going to say, it's just to save money as well. So I've got a lot of people that will opt for a smaller room in order to save more money. So they have more disposable income for going out, for going to the movies, to have a nice meal out. They'd rather have a slightly smaller room to have more disposable income. So I think for someone on a budget, it is absolutely the most economical option out there for you. And I can't even begin to tell you how many people actually, they've gone out, they're fresh grad, they've gone out to get a 1-bed flat, and they've literally boomeranged back to me going, I can't keep up with the bills. I didn't realize it was more than just the rent. It was broadband, it's water, it's council tax, it's this and that. And by the time you add that all up, in my area anyway, you're looking at over £1,000 a month when you start adding all of that up. And you think, hang on, how am I going to save my money if all of my outgoings are, towards living, really?
Absolutely.
Yes, that's a very economical option for someone,
And what about on the flip side of that, for an investor wanting to get into HMO? Would you say someone that's on a tight budget as an investor getting to go and buy a house, do you think it's the strategy to pick?
I think it depends on where you are in your investing journey, to be fair. If you're on a budget going into HMOs, you can definitely get one that's up and running. I mean, there's all sorts of planning legislation that you might want to get one that's up and running already. You might not have the choice to. I think it also depends on your goal. If you're after cash flow, if you're after capital growth, when do you want, that kind of income coming through, and how much time you have? Do you want to manage? Do you not want to manage? That can all impact on your cash flow as well. I wouldn't say they're particularly easy. If you're on a tight budget, you can definitely go up north and buy, an up and running HMO. And get that.
Cost of because people want to get into, I always say, pick your strategy that suits you. Don't pick the strategy that gives you the most return, because some people may not like multiple people to deal with. So you've picked a strategy that you love, you're passionate about, and it works for you. But it even works even more because you've attached the co-living aspect of it. So that really suits you. But would you advise a newbie investor coming onto the market, hey, go off and get a HMO?
To be fair, I wouldn't. And the reason why I say that is because I would rather see someone go into single lets and test themselves as a landlord.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this, you can go straight to HMO. I know people that have gone straight to HMOs or gone straight into rent to rent. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but they've also got a lot of time on their hands to do that.
Yes.
If you've never been a landlord before, never been an investor before, I would definitely say test the waters with a single let, because you can definitely get an edge of, it's a stress test yourself as to how much time you have to deal with tenants, how much you actually want to communicate. Some people don't want to touch their tenants or know their names. Some of them want to go around for a cup of tea. It really depends on what you are as a person, and everyone will be different. Everyone has different time elements. Everyone has different pot of money to begin with, and there's no right or wrong answer for any of that. But if I think for a newbie investor, if you've never been a landlord and you've never been an investor before, I would start the easy way and start at the bottom with a single let, and then work your way up for something more complicated.
The last question for you: in an ideal world, what does the future of co-living look like, and what do you think it would take to achieve?
That's a really good question. The future of co-living, I think the demand is going to go through the roof. I think there is more and more young people that want that social aspect coming out of COVID. And you've seen people that go, you know what, I don't want to live in my one bed flat where all I do is go to work after my 13-hour shift and I come home and all I talk to is my four walls. If COVID taught us anything, it's how important that human connection and that interaction really is. And I'm not talking, let's go into a 10-bed HMO and I'm going to have lots of housemates. That's not what I'm talking about. There can be really boutique HMOs that you can only have 4 people in there, 3 or 4 people in there. But again, I had a lot of people who I think cited loneliness coming out of COVID for their reason wanting to go into a co-living space. So I think, they're very picky about their housemates. They're very clued on. They've lived in a housemate, in a house share before. They've come out and they're like, but I want a clean space, but I want my housemates to be nice and like me. The last thing you want is to put a 21-year-old graduate female with a 55-year-old male coming out sharing the same bathroom. To me, that doesn't gel. I mean, sometimes it will, but having the same personality type and having the same profile will be really helpful when they're all like, oh, yeah, we're all in the same, like, let's all go out for a drink at the pub. And that's what I want to facilitate. And I think the future of co-living is bright. I think it has been around for a long time. Absolutely. It's just really getting the ball rolling now, and more people are cluing on as to what that is. But I don't think you can just say, I have a nicely designed HMO. Hey, I've got co-living. It doesn't really work that way. No. You need to have a community element, and you need to have, the events that go with it to facilitate that community vibe. So without that, I don't really think you have that. But I think it's just going to get bigger as more and more people clue on as to what young people really want.
So that's a key question. I'm sorry, I said it was the last question, but you just raised the point there. What are the key elements that differentiates between a HMO and a co-living space? What are those? Because we talked about having a community space and shared living. What is it that makes it different? What is co-living that sets apart from being just a regular Joe HMO?
I think from an investor, if I put my investor hat on now, I would definitely say have a look at your communal spaces and what the facilities you have within the house. If you're talking about external stuff, that's great. All HMOs should have great access to shops and transport and all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to make it different, to me, what makes my big co-living property, really co-living, it's that communal space. The fact that they use the pool table, the fact that they have the bar's full, by the way, guys. The fact that they have, a yoga area where they actually do weights, do Pilates and all that kind of stuff in there. It's a multi-use space. That's what makes it different. I could have put a 10th room in there, or not 10th room, but, an extra room in there. If I wanted to. From a pure money perspective, absolutely no brainer, right? That's more rent coming in. But that's not what we wanted to create. And, that communal space, having that, a gathering pool to the whole ground floor of that particular property is just dedicated to communal space. So living, dining, courtyard, gaming space, relax lounge, all that kind of stuff. That all of those kind of things when you're designing your own HMO is really important. And I know not all floor plans can kind of accommodate that, but I think when you're looking to buy, that's definitely something that I would be looking for is how can I make my communal space bigger? Some of them don't even have lounges. It's just four bedrooms and a 7 square meter kitchen. And I was thinking to myself, would I want to live in a space like that? No. Probably not. But so put yourself in the tenant's shoes. What do your tenants want? And some people, they do want an economical room. They just want to stay in their room, and that's fine. But if you really want that co-living space, have a look at how much communal square meterage you are adding to your property.
And I know of spaces that have sort of reading nooks as well, a little library where they can go to, little seating areas dotted around the property that they can just, 2 chairs, they can sit down and converse with one another. And also local deliveries of pastries and things like that for breakfast in the morning. All these different things that you can offer these services, and they're paying a couple pence extra to have fresh pastries in the morning, or someone coming in and do fresh pots of coffee and putting on events, buy locally, going out to wine bars, the movies, just having something that you're doing it and building it because of the community. And then once that the word gets out about you're offering this space, all of your other properties now people want to clamoring for, because they're thinking, I want to live there. I'm even thinking I want to come and play pool at your property myself. It's such a good way of really connecting with people. And like you said, through the whole year that we've sort of gone through this whole pandemic, having that space where they had the pool table, where they had the lounges and things like that, they could get together because they were in one house. So boredom really wouldn't kick in because they've got people around them that they could have communicated with, and they're going through the process together. As opposed to if you've got that 1-bedroom place or that studio place and you're just isolated by yourself, it's mind blowing how lonely it can become. So I really do respect that you have created these spaces for communities, and how you've balanced out the difference between not having sort of a young person and an older person cohabitating. You've made sure that each of the houses has set sort of characteristics that are the same and personalities that are the same. So they will form bonds even better with those things that you've actually done as a landlady, which I think is really kudos to you in doing that, so that that when you're putting them in that home, they should be able to settle well and feel part of a bigger expansive family, just because of the match is done well. So well done to that. Thank you so much, Sarah. So, how can our listeners and viewers contact you and learn more about the services that you offer?
We're quite big on Instagram. When I say big, I just like being on Instagram. So come and send us a direct message if you want to get involved. There's also our website, which is www.altstreetproperty.com. And every now and then we hold open days when we get to an end of a project. So watch out for that space. And Instagram is probably the best place to keep in contact.
We'll be definitely sharing the details in our feed and out on our promotional. So we'll look out for Sarah's everything she does. We'll also be showing you one of her promotional videos as well. So look out for that. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on the show. You've given us some great insights, how to be a really good landlady, how to present yourself as a businesswoman, how to present yourself in this co-living environment as well. I think you've done exceptionally well, and glad to have had you on here for you to share your insights into this space as well, because a lot of our viewers really want to learn about how to do HMO, but you've learned how to do HMO with a little bit of touch of spice on top of it, and that's co-living. So viewers, let's take flight. Thank you for listening to our show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and download, and definitely share. Thank you for joining us on the Savvy Property Investors Show.
This week's episode of the Savvy Property Investors Podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, the Savvy Women Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's show, head over to our website, www.savvywomen.co.uk, to gain access to our free resources and more insights about our guest speaker today. Remember, we make your business our business, so you can unlock your full potential and improve your quality of life.